On the screen, Mr. Charles sat in his familiar armchair. His silver hair, piercing eyes, but with an air of exhaustion. He took a deep breath before speaking. If you are watching this video, it means my will has been revealed, and it also means someone has intentionally concealed the truth. The room went silent. Karen clenched her fists, her face pale. I know some of you will oppose this, but I don't care. This is the truth, Mr. Charles continued, his gaze hardening. Karen, Rick, and the rest of the family, I can no longer trust you. A wave of shock washed over the room. Uncle Rick turned pale. The cousins began whispering. Karen jumped to her feet, her voice shrill. This is impossible. This is just a scam. But Mr. Charles on the screen kept speaking. You have deceived me, exploited me, and turned me into a lonely man in my own family. And my biggest mistake was pushing Julia out of my life. Julia covered her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. I was wrong to turn my back on you. I let my pride cloud my judgment. Julia, if you're watching this video, know that I am sorry. You deserve to receive what is rightfully yours. A file appeared on the screen, and Mr. Charles held it up, slowly flipping through the pages. This is my real will. Lawyer Connor paused the video, his voice calm but commanding. I'm afraid we need to re-examine all documents related to Mr. Charles's will. The room erupted. Karen screamed in protest. Uncle Rick tried to stop her, but it was futile. Meanwhile, Julia stood still, her hand gripping Eli's tightly. Everything was changing. And this time, she wasn't going to miss the chance to claim what was hers. The video resumed, and the entire room fell into tense silence. On the screen, Mr. Charles Anderson appeared. His face gaunt but his eyes still sharp. His voice came through, a little hoarse but full of weight. If you're watching this video, it means I've passed from this world. But before I go, I want to clear up some truths I've kept hidden for far too long. Everyone held their breath. Julia felt Eli's grip on her hand tighten, as if the boy already knew this would change everything. Julia, I know you're there. And the first thing I want to say to you is, I'm sorry. I was wrong. A murmur spread through the room. Karen frowned, and Uncle Rick glared at the screen. But Mr. Charles kept speaking, his voice filled with regret. I allowed my pride to cloud my judgment. I listened to the lies, the fabrications about you, and I turned my back on my own daughter. But the truth is, you never betrayed the family. I pushed you away because I refused to listen. I refused to understand that you too have your own pains and hurts. Julia bit her lip. Her eyes burned, but she didn't let herself cry. Not now. You've had to endure so much, especially from your unhappy marriage with Mark. When you begged me for help, I didn't believe you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. And that is the greatest mistake of my life. The room fell silent. No one could have imagined that Mr. Charles would admit to these mistakes in front of everyone. Then his voice deepened, carrying an anger that no one had ever seen before. But what I regret the most is that I believed Karen and Rick. Karen immediately shot up. What are you talking about, Dad? But Lawyer Connor raised his hand, signaling for her to be quiet, and the video continued. Karen, you've always wanted to control everything. The moment I fell ill, you took advantage of my condition to manipulate me, to make me believe Julia didn't deserve anything. You did everything you could to push her out of my life. But now I know the truth. I know that you only wanted to take over the entire estate. Karen turned pale, but Mr. Charles didn't stop there. And Rick, my brother. I trusted you and gave you the responsibility to manage the family business. But I was blind. You abused your power, embezzled funds, and used the family's money for personal gain. I have evidence of all of this. And if you think I don't know, you're wrong. Rick froze, his face turning red with anger. This old man is crazy, he muttered, but anyone could see the worry in his eyes. Mr. Charles's voice softened as he turned back to Julia. My daughter, I can't change the past, but I can correct my final mistake. All eyes were on the screen as Mr. Charles held up a stack of documents. "I've left behind another legal will, notarized before I was manipulated by lies. And in that will, Julia, you are my official heir. The entire estate, the company, and the properties are yours. This is my final act of atonement." The room exploded. Karen screamed, "This is impossible. This isn't legal. Dad signed a new will." Lawyer Connor calmly placed a folder on the table. The will Mr. Charles mentions in this video was notarized and legalized before the will Karen referred to. Therefore, by law, the last valid will takes precedence. And according to that, Julia Anderson is the sole heir. Rick turned pale, and Karen slammed her hand on the table. "No, I will sue. I won't let this happen." Julia looked at the twisted faces filled with rage, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was no longer the outcast. Eli looked at his mother, smiling with pride. Perhaps finally justice had spoken. As soon as Lawyer Connor confirmed the will's legality, the room filled with tension. Karen and Rick, who had been used to controlling everything, could not accept the truth. Hashtag Karen and Rick reject the truth. Karen stood up abruptly, her voice full of rage. "All of this is fake. My father would never leave his estate to an ungrateful person like Julia." Rick also spoke up, trying to regain control of the situation. "I won't let this happen. Julia doesn't deserve anything from this family." They quickly hired a top legal team to dispute the will's validity. In the following days, the media was flooded with news about the lawsuit in the Anderson family. Hashtag Julia decides to fight for Eli. At first, Julia didn't want to get involved in a legal battle that would drain her emotionally and take up so much time. She was tired of the years of being rejected by her family. But when she looked at Eli, who still believed in what was right, she realized that she couldn't back down. "Mom, this isn't just about you. It's about the truth. If Grandpa regrets his actions, you can't let them trample on that," Eli said, his eyes full of determination. Julia took a deep breath. For her son, for her own honor, she decided to join the fight. Hashtag family tensions escalate. Karen and Rick not only used the law but also exploited the media to smear Julia's name. Articles appeared in major news outlets with headlines like, "The estranged daughter wants to seize the estate. Julia Anderson, greedy or a victim." They twisted the truth, painting Julia as someone who betrayed her father, abandoned the family, and now came back only for the money. The public began to divide, and Julia had to face a wave of criticism from society. But she was not alone. Lawyer Connor and his team persisted in gathering evidence. And gradually, the truth began to unfold. Hashtag evidence against Karen and Rick. After weeks of investigation, the legal team found key documents. Rick embezzling company funds ** financial records showed that Rick had used millions of dollars from the company's funds for failed personal investments. Karen manipulating her father ** a recording from the nurse who cared for Mr. Charles revealed that Karen had pressured her father while he was critically ill, forcing him to change the original will. These pieces of evidence were presented in court, completely shifting the course of the lawsuit. Both Karen and Rick found themselves in a vulnerable position. Hashtag the law sided with Julia. In the end, the court declared the second will to be valid. Julia became the official heir, as her father had intended. Karen lost her claim to the mansion. The property was transferred to Julia. Rick was removed from the family company. The board decided to appoint a reliable manager instead of him. Julia restored her honor. She proved that she wasn't the greedy person the media had portrayed her to be. When the judgment was announced, Karen left the courtroom with a pale face, while Rick bowed his head in defeat. Julia looked at Eli, holding her son's hand tightly. The battle was over, and for the first time in years, she felt that justice had been served. The trial ended with a favorable verdict for Julia. The clear evidence of Karen and Rick's wrongdoings left them unable to continue the fight. Julia officially regained her rightful inheritance according to her father's true will. But as she left the courtroom, she didn't feel the overwhelming joy of a victor. Instead, she only felt a sense of relief and peace. Karen and Rick walked away in bitterness. They no longer had the standing to fight for the inheritance. Julia watched them leave, without any thoughts of gloating or seeking revenge. What she wanted was simply to live in peace and create a better future for Eli. After some reflection, Julia decided not to keep the Anderson estate. It held too many painful memories, the wounds she had endured. Instead, she sold it and used the money to invest in her son's future. Part of the funds were donated to charity organizations, something her father had once wanted to do but had never accomplished. Life for the two of them gradually stabilized. One day, Julia and Eli stood before a small house by the sea. The sea breeze blew gently, carrying with it the scent of freedom and new beginnings. The house was not extravagant or luxurious, but it was warm and full of hope. Eli held his mother's hand, his eyes shining. "Finally, you have what you deserve," the boy said with a bright smile. Julia bent down and hugged her son. Happy tears rolled down her cheeks. She knew that not only had she regained her honor, but she had also found true peace. It wasn't money or possessions. It was love, trust, and a life where she could choose her own path. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, as if welcoming a new journey. A journey that Julia and Eli would walk together, no longer burdened by the shadows of the past.